Good morning, everyone. We've got some latecomers coming in at the top there, but we'll get underway because we've got a very busy few days ahead of us. My name is Jennifer Kunick and I'm the chair of the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute, also known as AHURI. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 Australian Homelessness Conference today. Excuse me. Many of you will already be familiar with the work of AHURI. It is Australia's national independent research organisation dedicated to housing, homelessness, cities and urban research. Our peer-reviewed research is globally respected. It's used by all levels of Australian governments to support policy and decision-making, and by community sectors and industry to support advocacy and to improve practices across the housing and homelessness sectors. The Australian homelessness sector is a determined and purposeful sector, providing essential support to Australia's most vulnerable and disadvantaged people. I'd like to acknowledge each and every one of you for your work and the work that you continue to do, and I wish you every success. I hope the next couple of days are informative and inspiring, and I'm looking forward to great discussions. But first, it is my pleasure to invite Auntie Rosalind Coleman to the stage for the Welcome to Country.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here this morning to welcome you to country. I always look at it as about sharing a little bit about my culture and my country here on Ghana. So mani na putni nakina minya, na mani na Nari Rosalind Coleman, mara wichinanga Ghana minyana, na wangadi mani na putni Ghana yurtana, na chu yungagata yakanandaya. What I just said is that it's great that you've come here this morning and for the next few days. The land that we meet on today is the land of the Ghana people, and I would like to pay my respect to my elders, past, present and those emerging. But I also know that we have some other nations that are present here with us this morning. I would also like to welcome you and to pay my respect to your elders, past, present and those emerging. I would also, like I said, my name is Rosalind Coleman. I'm a proud Ghana and Narungga woman with a historical bloodline connection and links to Ghana country and Narungga country. I am the inheritor of 60,000 plus years of Ghana wisdom from my ancestor Nellie Ramandari and my parents Stanford and Nellie Wanganeen. So good morning, welcome to our beautiful Ghana land. Ghana Miana are the Aboriginal people of the Adelaide region. Ghana Miana Yerita, the Ghana people's traditional tribal land or country. I also want to acknowledge the Ghana people as the protectors and the caregivers of the Adelaide Plains region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are spiritually connected and important to the living Ghana people today. I also want to acknowledge those that have come before us who have opened doors and continually fought the hard battles in keeping our culture alive and strong today as we build upon their legacy today and into the future. Some may not know, but our land is the home of the great red kangaroo Tanda, the great Ghana ancestral spirit Tribilki, the ibis man. We know and we've heard many times about the kangaroo. It never moves backwards, it always moves forward. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we want to continually move forward. Our living Karawira Para, the River Torrens, calls you to rest a while on its gentle banks. The Red Gum Forest River is the Ghana name for the watercourse, called the River Torrens by the colonists. It was an important resource area and a favourite camping place for the Ghana people, providing water, fish and other foods. The Ghana, Miana, the Ghana people, very significant place where we're meeting today for the Ghana people. And to share that with you all this morning and the next couple of days is so exciting. But people have migrated to these beautiful shores that we call Australia today. I would like to recognise, acknowledge and embrace the true history of this country, a history which dates back thousands of generations. The very footprint on this country were those belonging to the Aboriginal people, who are the traditional owners and are thankful for the community that we share, we live and we work together now. I would also like to acknowledge the cultural authority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people throughout this country. And I know we have a few of them that are present here. And also those that are visiting, I know that we have some special guests that are with us that have travelled a long, long way to be present here this morning. I know that this gathering is a very special and important event and welcome you all here this morning of the Australian Homelessness Conference, and what an important work that we need to do with our homeless. We see it right across our country, the homelessness of our vulnerable people. A quote by Mahatma Gandhi is to be the change that you want to see in your community. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Aboriginal people right across this country want to see change. Improve employment stability and safety within our community, to experience peace, love, hope and a safe place to grow, but also to capture and promote a beautiful surroundings in creating a safe and enjoyable place to live. That's why you are all here this morning, discussing and sharing and also working with one another about best practices and what's working within community and for the most vulnerable people within our community. You are the voice that advocates on behalf of the community within AHURI. This event has delivered vital research and insight that have guided governments and shaped community thinking. As the only organisation in Australia dedicated exclusively to housing, homelessness, cities and related urban research, AHURI is a unique venture. Through national network and university partners, and it's about improving practice and inform the broader community. We understand the work that you do is so important and very vital in helping our homelessness. It is a place where leading-edge thinkers, experts and providers meet to challenge their assumptions and open their horizons to new ideas and approaches. These conferences or gatherings is a place to meet and challenge the way you conduct and improve business. AHURI housing is one of their most important rights, as housing provides spaces for stability and security in many social, cultural and economical aspects of individual and family life. It's up to us. It's up to you. We must all play our part. We must take ownership and be responsible for the transformation of the housing industry through research and be the change that we want to see. But we aren't alone on this journey. We are tracking together with the guidance of those that are in authority and leadership within the AHURI and those that are here with us today in finding our way and making change. Myself and you, also that are present here this morning, have been backed and entrusted to shape, guide and lead this journey. These words are designed to turn into action that will achieve real and great results with successful outcomes that will deliver on changing lives, not just for today's generation, but for the next generation to come in our community and in our society. Our desire here today is to honour this in the best way that we know how, and that is to remain focused, understand and listen to the words, wisdom, can continually to involve and make change for the betterment of our community and those that are in leadership. To always remain true to the intentions and ensure that no meaning is lost, to have a desire and an energy to move forward today and into the future. In no challenge too tall to face, no future too small to expand. May the beats of many hearts create a beautiful symphony in tune and rhythm with each other as we come and we work together. That justice rolls like the waves of the oceans that surround these beautiful lands of our beautiful country called Australia. From north to east to south to west, from coast to forest to desert to city, we are all tuning together in on country. It is the very essence of who we are, our identity and connection to country. May our footprints on these ancient lands of the Kaurna country and other nations remind us of creation and connectedness in our search to truth-telling. May the gum tree, from its roots to its branches, remind us to dig deep and reach high in our call for love, peace, justice, equality and community. In closing, a wise old elder once said to me a long, long time ago, and it's stuck with me today, and I say this to a lot of people. He says, Roz, he says, life will always give you a great memory or a great lesson. He says, trust your inner spirit. It knows the way, and it will guide and lead your path as to your destiny. And for me, I've experienced both. And may you all walk away in the next couple of days with both. Natalia, thank you very much and have a great couple of days.
Mani Naputni, welcome everyone, and thank you, Auntie Rosalind Coleman, for that very thoughtful welcome to country. My name's Dr. Michael Fotheringham. I'm the Managing Director of AHURI, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the 2024 Australian Homelessness Conference. I want to start by adding my acknowledgement to the traditional country of the Kaurna people of Tandanya, the Adelaide Plains, and pay my respect to elders past and present, to celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters throughout Australia. And I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today and express my heartfelt respect for their cultural, spiritual and educational practices. AHURI convenes the Australian Homelessness Conference every 2 years to help frame the national conversation in practice and in policy. And as many of you are aware, this conference is the largest gathering of the homelessness sector, designed by the sector for the sector. Our conference tagline for 2024 is Gathering Momentum. It speaks to the optimism within the sector and celebrates important progress that's been made in recent years. It also recognises that we're not there yet. There's more to do. And we have an unrelenting housing shortage, and some challenges we now face are even greater than before. Over the next 2 days, we will all have many important conversations. We'll share successes and examples of what works, and we'll grapple with ongoing difficulties. With the dogged determination that defines this sector, we'll continue to gather momentum and look forward to the further steps we can make towards ending homelessness in this country. I'd like to acknowledge our international speakers, Tim Richter from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, who we'll hear from tomorrow, and Jemine Bryon from the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, who will be joining us very shortly. I'd also like to extend a particular warm welcome to the many people who have lived experience of housing vulnerability who are here in the conference, either as presenters or as delegates. Your experiences and insights play a vital role in shaping better housing outcomes for the future. We're thrilled this year to have people with identified lived experience speaking in around half of the conference sessions. We're also grateful to Mission Australia for again being our sponsored delegate partner, which has enabled 12 people with lived experience to attend this year's conference as delegates. The next 2 days, across 22 official conference sessions, around 90 speakers will tackle a whole range of issues. The backbone of the conference is, of course, the lineup of plenary sessions. This morning, our first plenary echoes across the Pacific in conversation with Jemine Bryon. Then this afternoon, the plenary will focus on closing the gap, priorities and reforms for housing and homelessness. Tomorrow, we'll start the day with our third plenary, Working Together to End Homelessness, Away and at Home, featuring Tim Richter over from Canada. And we finish the conference looking forward with our final plenary, Where to from here, facilitated by the ABC's Emma Rebellato. And those are just the plenary sessions. Beyond them, you have a wealth of choices as you may consider which of the major concurrent and concurrent sessions you want to attend. And with so much to choose from, you'll want to plan your personal conference schedule carefully. That's why we have a conference portal. To use the portal, you can curate your own program by saving the sessions you want to attend. If you haven't accessed it already, now's the time. We have Wi-Fi available to make that easier. I think there'll be a slide for that in a moment. And to access the app, you can scan the QR code on the back of your name badge or use the personal login details you received by email earlier this week. If you have trouble receiving the email or have any trouble with that, check your junk folders, all the usual methods. If you have trouble, talk to the AHURI staff in the black shirts or the volunteers wearing the fantastic purple t-shirts. Or you can just pop across to the information desk over by the registration area. I also want to mention that we have quiet rooms available. We're dealing with some very human challenges in this conference, and there can be times when the discussions can be overwhelming. If at any time during the conference you find yourself needing some quiet space and just some time to reflect, please don't hesitate to approach Ailey at the information desk and she'll be very happy to help you. There's also the opportunity to step outside to the lawns, which are readily accessible outside the convention centre. If there are sessions you can't get to, all's not lost. All of the sessions in this year's conference are being recorded and all of the recordings will be made available to you after the conference is concluded. We're delighted to be back here in Adelaide this year, hosted by the Government of South Australia, and so it's my very great pleasure to invite to the stage our ministerial speaker, the Honourable Katrine Hildyard, Acting Minister for Human Services.
Thank you for that lovely welcome. I also start by acknowledging we are here together on land that always was, that is and always will be Kaurna land, by paying respect to Kaurna elders past, present and future, and to elders and people of other Aboriginal nations. In making that acknowledgement, I honour the role that many Aboriginal elders play in tirelessly advocating for families over years, decades and lifetimes, and thank them for their strength and resilience and for really generously sharing their 65,000 plus years of wisdom, culture and knowledge. I acknowledge and thank you, Auntie Rosalind, for your beautiful, warm welcome to country, and also for you and your families' enduring leadership in communities across our state. Thank you so much for your just lovely words today. They were really inspiring. I also acknowledge AHURI Chair Jennifer Kunik and Managing Director Dr. Michael Fotheringham, researchers, policymakers, frontline workers who are there when people face their toughest times, the loved ones of those without a roof over their heads, and most importantly, those here today with experience of homelessness who know better than anyone the absolute imperative we have to collectively address it. In making those acknowledgements, I honour all in communities across Australia who have walked that frightening, difficult journey of not having a safe space to call home, to be their sanctuary, to be their place that enables them to equally, actively participate in every aspect of community life and in our economy with franchise, respect and dignity. It is an honour to be with you all, and I acknowledge the privilege that I have to be with you, having woken up in my warm bed, being able to go to a hot shower, have a hot cup of tea before joining you all. I'm really grateful to each of you for bringing your energy, wisdom, experience and compassion to these crucial discussions and your willingness to share your expertise as we seek ways to ensure that everyone can have that same experience every morning. One of the lovely things about talking with a conference full of experts is that you obviously have deep understanding of the issues that we confront. I'm also aware that at a conference full of experts, I suspect that every single one of you could give this opening address. Despite that, and with humility and again deep gratitude for your commitment, I hope I can add some context and pose some questions to add to your collective really important thinking over the next couple of days. And think and question together we must, because the persistent rates of people experiencing homelessness in this country of abundance is shameful and a relentless call to action. Your list of speakers and facilitators is really impressive and wide-ranging, with contributors from across the Pacific, the US and Canada, interstate experts, local talents, the voices of Aboriginal leaders, and the biggest experts, those with direct experience. Reflecting the complexity of homelessness and the collective responsibility that we all and the thousands of others not here with us today share to urgently drive change, we will hear from governments, academia and the community sector, along with health, housing, domestic and family violence, mental health, community services and planning experts. Today I'm here also representing the Minister for Human Services, with tackling homelessness a shared priority. As Minister for Women and the Prevention of Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence and Minister for Child Protection, every single day I am reminded of the complex and interconnected issues families face across generations, and that housing insecurity features so strongly amongst those issues. The Minister for Human Services and I play particular roles, but every one of our parliamentary colleagues also bears responsibility, as does every community member. Health systems across the country are under pressure, with questions rightly being asked about what is driving people to hospital and what is making it harder for them to leave. And one of the many answers to that question is homelessness. In the past fortnight, my colleague, the Minister for Health and Wellbeing, in partnership with the Salvation Army here in Adelaide, has opened a dedicated 20-bed service to support people who might otherwise be discharged into homelessness. I'm really proud and moved by that step forward. Moved because I remember standing with my younger sister one Christmas Eve a couple of decades ago, when she was being discharged from a mental health unit at one of our major hospitals. As we were working through her discharge, a young man was standing next to us, working through his. Dealing with long-term mental illness is really hard. Being discharged, as he was, with no one standing with you and literally nowhere to go on Christmas Day nor on any of the days that followed, is so very, very hard, and absolutely a call to action to every person in government and in community to do so much better. This announcement I just spoke about is about doing better, as is our investment in longer-term case management to help people break the cycle of homelessness, and in doing so, reduce demand on the health system, on justice agencies and emergency accommodation. Without going into every detail of every portfolio, ministers who manage housing and urban development, residential tenancies, disability and mental health, emergency relief, police, corrections and the court system all have direct responsibility to tackle homelessness. And that list of responsible departments, those who have a role to play, is growing. Climate change affects everyone, but those without shelter or whose home is overcrowded, neglected or substandard are particularly exposed. When natural disasters strike, like the catastrophic flooding we saw in 2022, those experiencing homelessness were more affected than anyone, as they are when our temperatures soar. Increasingly, environment and emergency management portfolios must also look at their work through a homelessness lens. And all of this before I refer to Treasury. The huge human consequences of homelessness demand compassion and action. The financial and economic impacts experienced through people accessing high-cost services while struggling to engage in the economy are compelling. And it's not just the financial cost, it's the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is fundamentally about what could happen if the event in front of us wasn't unfolding. It's a term that I think helps us focus on the possible contributions that every person can absolutely make and the sadness and cost of unrealised, unsupported potential. When people spend months, years or decades isolated on the margins of our community, what we end up with, sadly, are lifetimes worth of potential lost. In a different, kinder, more loving and more inclusive world, those lives could be spent working, learning, earning, creating, caring, doing so many other things than wondering where they will sleep, where they can use a bathroom, or from where their next meal may come. Friends, as you all know, we have a burning human and an economic imperative to do so much more, and some pressing questions to answer about what that more is, what those actions are that we must take. We know we have to do something more. It's not always easy to know what to do, nor to muster the collective will and resources required to do what will actually make a difference, nor to cede power or funding to ensure the best possible community-led responses are privileged where needed, and nor to recognise and respond to the fact that the actions we have always taken may not be the most impactful, nor to the fact that the actions in one place, community or culture may not be right for another, which is why gatherings like this, gathering momentum, is so important. Over the next 2 days, I encourage you, as you explore the wicked problems that have challenged governments and communities alike for decades, and examine emerging problems and current programs and new ideas for policy and collaboration. I hope you leave here with your commitment to changing the world renewed. I encourage you to hold that commitment firmly in your hearts and minds as you consider all that has passed and creative ways forward. Post-colonisation, the Australian government's response to homelessness didn't begin with new homes. It began with the first age pension in 1909 and the first disability support pension in 1910. These huge social reforms put a previous response out of business, the dreaded destitute asylums that existed, including here in South Australia. Before that time, people who didn't have family or private resources to support them in their older years or following the onset of illness quite literally went to what was sadly known as the poorhouse. South Australia is part of that shameful period, but it also has a long and proud history when it comes to addressing homelessness. We were the first jurisdiction in Australia to establish a state housing authority, the South Australian Housing Trust, back in 1936, and it continues. It was established at a time when local groups like the Adelaide Benevolent Society and others already saw the need to compassionately provide safe, secure and affordable housing, and responded decades before governments acted. And while the South Australian Housing Trust was an organisation founded to help working families and provide a broad housing response, it also delivered its first emergency housing program in the 1950s. The circumstances weren't too different to today. War had reduced the availability of materials and driven up prices. There was a shortage of skilled labour. Single older women, many of whom had lost partners and children to the war, experienced the greatest need, and media reports at the time referred to people sleeping in tents. In this context, at that time, the government took bold action. The Housing Trust delivered more than 2,000 low-cost homes in just 2 years. Many were what we'd called transportables, with the intention at some point to move them elsewhere as demand moved. But they never moved because more and more were needed as demand increased. By the 70s, the issues single older women experienced remained a challenge, with women living an average of 11 years longer than men at a time when many women still had to leave their employment when they got married. The Housing Trust ran everything from emergency housing responses to public housing rental and large programs to help people buy a home. Programs in the 1970s that meant you could put a $100 deposit down on one of two different homes, the $11,000 version or the $14,000 version. In 1989, the then Labor government founded Home Start Finance, which has helped more than 80,000 South Australians to buy a home. By the early 90s, the Housing Trust had more than 63,000 rental homes, or around 13% of the housing in this state and around 1 in 2 of every rental homes. Sadly, things have drastically changed. Over the past 30 years, we've seen a chronic decline in public housing in both raw numbers and as a percentage of the overall housing stock. And at the same time, large-scale deinstitutionalisation has occurred. Closing institutions is, of course, a good thing, but it wasn't accompanied by parallel reforms to ensure that former residents had housing and community support. As a result, we now face huge challenges in trying to help people who just cannot access housing at market prices. Single older women, younger people, especially those leaving state care, people with ill health, disability challenges, those exiting prison or hospitals, and family violence survivors. To address the needs before us, we need more homes and more resources really, really fast. This is really hard, but there is hope. For the first time in a generation, state and federal governments are investing in the same direction at the same time. And in South Australia, we will rightly finally see the first proper increase to public housing in 30 years. The state government has invested more than $230 million for public housing since 2022, and through the Commonwealth, another $135 million is going into the broader social housing sector. Before long, we will see the first homes under the Commonwealth's $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund. Since 2022, here in SA, we've also increased homelessness funding by around $35 million. And in recent weeks, we closed tender applications to build a new 50-unit complex in the CBD with provision for on-site supports to support those exiting homelessness. Our government is absolutely focused on accelerating initiatives and developing innovative solutions to get more South Australians into their own homes and to support low-income and vulnerable people to access the housing that meets their needs. Our housing roadmap, launched in late June, sets out our plan. We intend to accelerate new housing supply across a range of development models for a diversity of household types and for a range of tenure options from outright purchase through to shared equity, market and affordable rental for working households and retirees, and rental options for those most in need in our community. We know there is no easy solution to addressing housing shortages, and accordingly, our housing roadmap is not just a once-off cash splash. It is the start of a comprehensive response that encompasses initiatives across land release, urban planning, critical infrastructure, skills training, public housing growth, directly delivering housing through government-led projects, creating partnerships with the private sector and the not-for-profit community housing sector, policy reform and more. Through the housing roadmap, we're massively boosting the release of land for residential development and streamlining planning approvals. We're reforming the rental market and adapting our housing frameworks to meet changing community needs. and we are reversing the shameful long-term decline in public and affordable housing overseen by successive governments here in our state. Our focus is on providing a diversity of housing choices for South Australians rather than trying to dictate that it must be housing created through urban consolidation or it must be greenfield development or apartments on main roads. And developing more affordable houses for low to moderate income households and vulnerable community members is a firm priority for our government. It is a core part of this plan. Our urban renewal agency, Renewal SA, is delivering more than 3,600 homes with around 30% of affordable homes for purchase or rent in partnership with the private development and construction industry and the not-for-profit community housing sector. Crucially, in addition to Renewal SA's efforts, around 1,000 new homes for affordable purchase are being progressively delivered by the South Australian Housing Trust through the Affordable Housing Initiative. We are doing all of this because we know that if we are to realise our state's significant social and economic potential, we know we need places for people to live, and because we know that a functioning, fair economy must provide equality of opportunity and mechanisms to support our most vulnerable brothers and sisters to step into those opportunities. We're doing all of this because, like every one of you here, we deeply understand that it is utterly unacceptable for any person not to have a safe place to call home, a place that enables them to live with security, dignity, and that ongoing ability to participate, to live actively, to work, to base your every action from. Again, finally, I encourage you in your really serious and important discussions. I wholeheartedly thank you for your focus on solving one of our human family's greatest challenges. As you gather momentum together over the next couple of days, please look after yourselves and each other, and please take a moment to enjoy the beauty of this wonderful place that I'm really privileged to call home. Thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for your commitment and passion. I really wish you well for this Australian Homelessness Conference 2024. Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thank you.
Really appreciate
Take
it.
care.
Thank you very much, Minister Hildyard. Now, it's taken the support of many organisations and individuals to bring together the Australian Homelessness Conference again this year, and I want to just take a moment to acknowledge some of our key partners. Firstly, to our hard-working Program Advisory Committee and our two excellent working groups, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Working Group and the Lived Experience Working Group, who all brought a wealth of experience and advice to shape the program for this year's conference. I want to express my appreciation once again to our host government partner, the Government of South Australia, who is also one of our principal partners with Business Events Adelaide and the Adelaide Convention Centre, and thank you for their support for the conference. Thanks also to our gold partner, Mission Australia, who I mentioned earlier with the bursaries, and our silver partners returning for their second conference, Beyond Bank, who are supporting the sold-out networking breakfast tomorrow morning. Now, if you have a ticket for the breakfast tomorrow and you know you won't be able to make it, please let us know at the information desk, because we do have a waiting list of people really hoping to get hold of the granola and good conversation. Thanks also to our bronze partners, Uniting SA, who are sponsoring the Pocket program, and Micah Project sponsoring the all-important coffee cart in the exhibition precinct. Indeed, thank you to all of our conference sponsors and exhibitors who signed up to show their support for this important event and help us deliver this year's program. I encourage you to take the opportunity to visit our exhibitors over in the exhibition hall, where we'll also have our tea breaks, lunch, and the welcome reception at the end of today's program. In the last few years, as we've emerged from the system shocks of a pandemic, housing and homelessness challenges have become more profound and more prominent across the developed world. The United States and Australia have somewhat similar recent histories and share broadly similar federated systems of government, with different roles played at local or municipal level, at state level and federally. We share a pattern of increasing urbanisation of our populations, changing climates and economies in which housing and property markets play pivotal roles. Arguably, an area of difference is that the US federal government has, since the 1960s, concentrated substantial resources in a Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. The US Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, is one of the executive departments of the US federal government. It administers federal housing and urban development laws, and the HUD Secretary reports directly to the President of the United States. Jemine Bryon has been HUD's Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Special Needs since 2017. She oversees administration of the Special Needs Assistance Program, SNAPS, and the HIV/AIDS housing program, which between them award over $5 billion annually to serve Americans who are homeless or at risk of homelessness through a wide variety of programs. Jemine has a remarkable resume, and I'd encourage you to read her bio in the conference portal. But now it's my pleasure to invite Jemine Bryon to the stage for our first plenary session. We'll begin with a presentation on the US context and the role HUD plays, and then have a broader discussion. Now, while she makes her way to the stage, we do have an on-screen message from Link Wentworth, who are sponsoring this session. Thank you.
God knows what is hiding in those weak and drunken hearts. Guess he kissed the girls and made them cry, those hard-faced queens of misadventure. God knows what is hiding in those weak and sunken eyes. Fiery throngs of muted angels giving love but getting nothing back. Oh, people, help the people. And if you're homesick, give me your hand and I'll hold it. People, help the people. Nothing will drag you down. Oh, and if I had to bring, I'd be cold as a stone and rich as a fool that turned all those good hearts away.
Thank you, Michael. That was quite moving. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jemine Bryon, and I thank you so much for allowing me the time to come and share some of our activities in the United States of America to address homelessness. But more importantly, thank you for allowing me to come here and learn as well from your work. Thank you, Auntie Roslyn, wonderful. I also give honor to Ghana people and the land that we are on today to have this wonderful conference. And also thank you to AHURI for inviting me and allowing me to speak today. So I've been asked to just give you a quick overview of our programs and our efforts to address homelessness. Lots of slides. I might go a little bit fast and then move over for our conversation. Thank you, Michael. Okay. I want to start with really how we define an end to homelessness in the United States. It is generally when every community has the ability and the capacity to have a systematic response in place that ensures homelessness is prevented and whenever possible or is otherwise rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. We expect every community to have the capacity to identify people who are at risk or who are experiencing homelessness. We want quick intervention to prevent the loss of housing and to divert people from entering the homelessness system. We want to be able to provide immediate access to permanent housing or access to low barrier shelter and crisis services. And when homelessness does occur, we want a system that is quickly available to reconnect people to housing, assistance, and services. Defining homelessness. So we have a number of categories of definition of homelessness, and it kind of dictates how communities sort of prioritize. There is a slight difference in how we define homelessness in the United States than in Australia, but ultimately I think we target the most vulnerable. So literally homelessness, I'll just quickly go through this, is where the individual or family lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence, meaning their primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place not meant for human habitation. They're living in a publicly or privately operated shelter designated to provide temporary living arrangements, such as congregate shelters, transitional housing, hotels, and motels. We also prioritize those who are imminent risk of homelessness. And again, basically, and it's an individual or family who will imminently lose their nighttime residence, provided that the residence will be lost within 14 days of application. We have a definition also for addressing those experiencing homelessness under other federal programs. And then we also prioritize homelessness services to those who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. And basically, we define it as a survivor who is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, which includes dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. So I want to share with you sort of one of the many ways that we capture data in order to understand homelessness. So what I have before you is sort of our tracking of homelessness. We conduct on an annual basis, although it's required every other year, a point-in-time count. And that provides us with data needed to understand the number and characteristics of persons who are homeless at a point in time. Communities are required to do this count for both sheltered and unsheltered individuals and families at least every other year. But this is very important information that communities and the federal government uses to drive policy, drive funding. So most of our continuums of care communities count every year. Communities undertake this count, which is an enormous undertaking by not only staff but volunteers in the community, the last 10 days in the month of January. What we saw, and let me just explain the chart a little bit. You see there is a gap in the line at the top, which speaks to the number of total people experiencing homelessness in 2021. As we all experienced, that was in the heart of the pandemic, and for obvious health and safety reasons, we did not conduct point-in-time counts during that year. But what is the most disturbing that we see here is our last count, which was in January of 2023. We saw an incredibly disturbing spike in the number of people experiencing homelessness. In fact, it was a 12% increase between 2022 and 2023. It is a disturbingly high number. That broke down to a 14% increase in people experiencing sheltered homelessness and a 10% increase in people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. What we saw in analyzing this data, and I think, again, we saw across the country, is a lot of higher rental costs and limited housing supply. I think most indicative of the spike that we saw was the end of the pandemic supports that were being provided in the United States. When we started through the pandemic and throughout the term of the pandemic, we saw a lot of controls that were put in place by the federal government. There was a federal eviction moratorium supported by state moratoriums that ran all the way through 2022, August of 2022. We had funding, CARES Act funding, homeless assistance, we had unemployment relief, and other emergency measures. In fact, my office, where we fund emergency solutions grants, which is basically shelter, prevention dollars, we received a $4 billion allocation under the CARES Act to address the needs of people experiencing homelessness. There were also other measures implemented. There was the emergency housing voucher program, which was 70,000 vouchers that were dedicated to people experiencing homelessness, providing them with a rental subsidy to find housing. Department of Treasury received, I think it was like about $55 million for emergency rental assistance. And again, that was available to all Americans who were struggling to pay rent. And in fact, it ended up, the program assisted like over 12 million people during the pandemic. We also saw our FEMA, which is our emergency management agency in the United States. They expanded and provided a lot of funding for non-congregate sheltering, which is basically hotels, motels, and really addressed the needs of moving people from unsheltered situations into the safety of housing, or at least temporary housing in a hotel. But coming out of that pandemic, what we saw was the end of the moratorium, putting 15 million folks at risk of eviction. Many of the temporary income support, stimulus payments, child tax credit benefits that were provided ended. We saw an end to the emergency rental assistance, again, that served almost 12 million people during the pandemic. That ended in 2022. And a tremendous scaling back by FEMA of paying for non-congregate sheltering. As a result of all of that, we saw this spike. We saw over 180,000 people coming into the homelessness system for the first time. It is a 25% increase in people requiring the assistance of the homelessness system in 1 year. It's the largest increase we had seen. And all of this was coming out of 2021, 22, and we have definitely identified it as the tremendous impact in that spike. And one other thing I'm sure is, as you've seen on the news, also really addressing the needs of asylum and migrants also coming into the United States during that period of time, also impacted the homelessness system. A little bit on our demographics. So clearly, the largest percentage, 55% of the people experiencing homelessness are between the age of 35 and 54. Gender, we have, again, an overwhelming amount of male versus female in the homelessness system, and also disproportionality in certain races as well when you look at the total population that they hold in the United States. So our Continuum of Care program, this is our primary tool for addressing homelessness in the United States. The Continuum of Care program is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness, and by providing funding for efforts by nonprofit providers, state and local governments, and promoting access to an effective utilization of mainstream programs. We have about 390 continuums of care in the United States and its territories, and that pretty much covers every community in the United States. They vary in size by city, county, in some cases entire states. A continuum of care is really a collection of entities and stakeholders who we expect to really plan and design the needs to address homelessness in their community. A continuum of care is made up of homeless assistance providers, local governments, other nonprofits, such as victim service providers, faith-based organizations, advocates, social service entities, people with lived expertise of homelessness, law enforcement, housing developers, universities, hospitals, mental institutions, businesses, school districts. The expectation is that the continuum of care is made up of all of these stakers who not only have the responsibility, but can really make an impact in ending homelessness. A few of our policy priorities that we drive through the Continuum of Care program, and it's set forth very prominently in our largest competition for funding that we run each year. And ending homelessness for all persons using a housing-first approach, reducing unsheltered homelessness, improving system performance through data, partnering with housing, health, and other service agencies, racial equity, how they address improving assistance to the LGBTQI+ individuals, engaging persons with lived expertise, building an effective workforce, and increasing affordable housing. These are all of the priorities that we expect each one of our continuums of care to implement in their communities. Housing first, I'm sure that we're all familiar with this approach to addressing homelessness. It prioritizes the rapid placement and stability in permanent housing in which admission does not have preconditions and in which housing assistance is not conditioned upon participation in such services. We feel that this is the bedrock of our approach to addressing homelessness, and it is a primary requirement of our continuums of care to implement a housing first approach. I want to just talk about a little bit of how we sort of manage the resources. And key to that is a coordinated assessment system, coordinated entry. This is also a requirement of all of the continuums of care that we fund, and it is a centralized, coordinated process designed to coordinate program participant intake, assessment, and provisions of referrals. Bottom line, trying to have a point of entry where everyone is experiencing homelessness, not where they have to run around and find all of the different projects, but there is one point of entry, and the point of the coordinated entry system is to make referrals based on the choice of the household and the available resources. A little bit on our funding. So HUD, my office, distributes the largest amount of funding through our homeless assistance grants in the federal government, and we are a thought leader in ending homelessness. We drive the programs through funding, policy, and technical assistance. So as I mentioned, Continuum of Care, our biggest program, on an annual basis, we are putting about $3.4 billion, that's billion dollars, out into communities to address homelessness. Within the Continuum of Care program, we have a number of set-aside funding opportunities also. I want to highlight that we do have a subset of funding set aside to address domestic violence. It's $52 million. We've been doing it for about 6 years now, so that's a tremendous amount of funding that has been put out to domestic violence service providers to really address the needs of survivors. We have our, under our Continuum of Care program, basically permanent housing, permanent supportive housing is delivered, rapid rehousing, which is a short or medium-term form of tenant-based rental assistance. We have a joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing program, transitional housing, which is provides housing for a maximum of 24 months. We fund for the operational costs of many of the programs. And supportive services, another very important component of our homelessness services. Under supportive services, we provide case management, childcare, education services, employment assistance, food, housing search, transportation, and many other services. We also provide for the administrative costs of our continuums of care and projects. We have a youth homelessness demonstration program. Very, very proud of that program. We have provided funding for about 7 years now to about 110 communities. The program has funded about $430 million so far to programs that are dedicated to ending the homelessness of our youth in the country. We have also our youth homelessness system improvement grants. I can talk about that a little bit more later, but that's a brand new source of funding. We receive about $25 million. We just issued a notice of funding opportunity and made awards to communities for up to $50 million. COC Builds, that's also a very new program. We just issued a notice of funding opportunity. It's out now, and we're waiting on applications to be submitted. But this is the first time we've actually provided funding, about $175 million to communities, to continuums of care, for the acquisition, rehab, or construction of units for permanent supportive housing. They're actually using these funds to go out and leverage the need and to fund the development of units with private entities, with other other housing programs that are operated by the federal government and local state programs as well. So it's a new, moving our continuums of care into more of the development world, and we'll see how it goes. And then National Homeless Data Analysis Project, that's basically all of our data. And then we also spend a tremendous amount of money on technical assistance. This is where we hire subject matter expert firms to go out into community and to work with our projects, sponsors, and also our continuums of care to really implement best practices. Technical assistance is key to our community's success. We've invested a lot of money in it, and they really are a force amplifier of my office and my staff. Again, just a quick brief of the programs that we administer. I talked a lot about them, but we target our limited resources to those who need them the most. We incentivize adoption of evidence-based best practices like Housing First. We promote high performance to target those who are most in need. By targeting and prioritizing those with the longest episodes of homelessness and severe service needs, we reallocate funds towards those models, such as rapid rehousing and PSH. And we do this all through these programs. It is a constant evaluation by not only at the federal level on our regulations, our policies, but also the expectation is that our continuums of care, that's why there's so many of them, that's why they're geographically based, also perform this analysis and make a determination of what their community needs. And they do so with all of the stakeholders, but most importantly, do so with the expertise of people with the experience of homelessness. I talked a little bit about our technical assistance. Again, a very important tool. Our HUD technical assistance resources, they create guides, online research, resources, training, knowledge building through online course and webinars. They provide one-on-one technical assistance, either remotely or actually will go out into the field and be embedded with our communities for a period of time to address whatever the needs are of that community. How do we determine progress? So I talked a little bit about the point-in-time count. We also have another report that we create, the Annual Homelessness Assessment Report, Part 2. And basically that report presents the estimates of people experiencing sheltered homelessness and who utilize the various types of homeless services that we have. I talked about how we do our point-in-time count, which was 650,000 people at any one point in time. We actually, from our Part 2 report, can say about 1.3 million individuals access our homeless services on an annual basis. System performance measures, basically the data that we collect from continuums of care, how we factor them into their allocation of funding. Just I provided you here with a list of those measures that we collect from the COCs. Very, very important on this list is the length of time persons remain homeless, the extent to which persons who exit homelessness to permanent housing destinations and their return to homelessness, obviously the number of people experiencing homelessness, their provision of employment and income growth for homeless persons in the programs, the number of persons who become homeless for the first time. As I mentioned, the direct impact of that number on the spike in our 2023 data. And also successful placement, and also the use of other federal statutes. What are some potential solutions? We struggle with this every day. The increase of the supply of rental housing with affordable rents. I heard your minister talk about that challenge here. It is an incredible challenge in the United States as well, just access to affordable housing. We have a multitude of programs in other parts of HUD that provide guidance, policy making, but also funding to communities for the development of affordable housing. We think the combination of legal and financial support that can prevent evictions and reduce the inflow into homelessness is critical. We need our landlords. They are a very important part of the solution. They need the support to continue to house tenants when tenants are in crisis. And even with available housing with modest rents, what we know is that people who are very at the low end of the poverty scale will always need subsidies to fill the gap between what they can afford and their rents. I think one of the greatest focuses we have had over the last year is, the homelessness system is catching people when they've already entered into a crisis situation. What we need to do to end homelessness everywhere is to prevent homelessness. We have to prevent it. We've provided our communities and are working with all of our partners to really look at strategies that attempt to mitigate the direct factors that lead to homelessness. Target those that are near to or below the poverty line. Increase income and assets. Increase affordable housing. These are those who are close to losing their housing. We need to use the data that we collect and target resources to neighborhoods with the overrepresentation in homeless system. Secondary method is to really implement strategies that help people find safe alternatives when they are seeking shelter or are likely to have to stay in unsheltered location. Diversion strategies, short-term housing assistance, relocation services, and obviously those strategies that provide stabilization assistance to people who have already experienced homelessness. We work with landlords, work with households to increase their income, and really just all of the programs that I mentioned are the systems that are the resources that we provide to those who have already entered into the system. Inflow is really what we're trying to stem. Our most common pathway to homelessness is exits from institutions or doubled up families, foster care, criminal justice system, those who are involved with child protective services. Those are the populations, people exiting those institutions that we work with the most. And again, coming up with strategies to prevent them as they exit from coming into our homelessness system is key to ending homelessness. We have a tremendous amount of resources on our website, and that is the last slide. I think I passed it. Well, I missed it. But HUD.gov is our website, and a tremendous amount of resources available. And with that, I will turn to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemine, for that remarkable 101 on the US
It's a lot.
homelessness system. It is a lot, and some of the dollar values you talk about.
I know.
Wow.
I always have to say it's a B, not an M billion. It's tremendous.
Yes, we need more bees.
Yeah.
You mentioned using technical assistance and policy to drive best practice. What are some of the areas of sort of emerging policy priority for you?
Well, as I mentioned, housing first. Although that is an evidence-based approach to addressing homelessness that's been around for a number of years, we still struggle with implementing it. We still struggle with a lot of view of, treatment first, housing second, almost as though it's a reward. So we continue to really emphasize the importance of housing first and how families who once housed now have the ability to really address their needs, whether it's in the employment area, the physical, mental health treatment, but housing is the critical first component. I talked a little bit about prevention, major area for us, working across the federal system, working on a local level with all of the other systems that are having issues that are causing people to flow into homelessness. So a lot of work with our United States Interagency Council on Homelessness as well. They oversee 19 of the federal agencies in how they implement policies that affect homelessness. So that's really key, working with all of our partners to accomplish that. I think that we also have, coming out of the pandemic, really got a great appreciation on the capacity challenges of all of our providers. We award probably about 6,500 to 7,000 projects per year, grants to nonprofits, local governments. That's a tremendous amount of not only funding, but projects, but people that are working to support folks who are experiencing homelessness. And we really have been, over the last couple of years, trying to ensure that our funding is made available to address the capacity needs of the providers. This year, for the first time, I'm crazy to say this, but our annual funding will actually have a bump up in funding for cost of living increases for the supportive services workers and our data workers out there in the communities. It is long overdue, and we're really proud of the fact that we're able to actually, above all, just layer on a percentage of funding just for salaries, recruiting, retaining employees. We also, major priority for me ever since I came into this program, our Continuum of Care program was an annual competition. So an annual competition, I told you it was $3.4 billion, and that is annually requiring communities to submit applications for funding to our agency. We would take in over 7,000, 8,000 applications, evaluate them, determine award. I mean, just a tremendous amount of work, not only on the local level, but also on the federal level. So this year we finally got our appropriations authority to move to a every other year competition, which is huge for our communities. It is really going to give them the space and the time to really evaluate what's happening in their community, to make changes if necessary. We really require the continuums of care to make the decisions on what they need on a local level. But they were so busy just responding to our competitions that they really didn't have that time and space to do so. So may not be powerful there, but every time in the United States I say we're moving to a 2-year NOFA, it's like a raging, because it's really just, it's going to save them like 75,000 hours. It's an incredible savings. So that's another form of really building the capacity of our providers that we've been doing this year.
That really resonates. I mean, I think we've moved from an annual homelessness agreement between our federal government and the state governments, who then provide support to the services, to rolling into part of the 5-year housing agreement. We did that in 2017. And one of the reasons was that lack of stability, that lack of funding certainty makes it very hard to innovate programs, to develop staff, to retain staff when you don't have funding certainty. So just moving to a 2-year window is a huge step for that scale of program.
It is. Yeah, we're really proud about it. We still have to wait for annual appropriations, but you know, they don't have to submit the hard work behind it. Is definitely relieved.
Fantastic. One of the things you hinted at was talking some more about youth homelessness. I want to take you up on that.
Yes.
And I think we did hear a voice trying to interject from a video we can go to in a moment. But tell us more about the work around ending youth homelessness specifically.
Yeah, so the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program is one that we started about 6 years ago. There is specific funding that is appropriated annually for this program. And I want to emphasize the part demonstration program. What the beauty of the YHDP program is that we are able to give communities regulatory flexibility. As a demonstration program, the idea of it is, here's the funding, you know the statute, you know the regulations, but what would you do differently? What innovations can you put into your system that's going to meet the goals of the program, and in this case, ending youth homelessness? What I also love about this program is that it was the first, and certainly the most aggressive effort on our part and community part to engage people, in this case youth, with lived expertise of homelessness. We require the communities applying for a YHDP grant to establish a youth advisory board, which is, again, exactly that, youth who will sit on a board and they advise we adults on how to meet their needs. Through the YHDP Youth Advisory Board, they are there to inform the application. They are there to do the community planning, which is required once the award is made. This is bringing all the stakeholders together and coming up with a comprehensive plan on how they will implement their YHDP grant. And then once we award the projects, or the individual projects start up, youth have a heavy involvement in the implementation of the program. It's a program that we're really, really proud of, especially because it is so youth-led. And as you said, we do have a video here that I really think is so important to show you. It gives me joy every time I see it. So if you can play the video, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Lex Dom Lauren.
My name's Hal Trejo.
I'm Courtney.
My name is Daphne Toussaint, and I'm a Youth Action Board member.
I was the founder of the Youth Action Board, and the purpose of it is to bring together a group of youth with lived experiences of homelessness to help guide the policies that are going to affect us.
We're working with our adult partners, creating just a revolutionary theory of change to make sure that youth can get connected to local housing resources and support. We've been able to really start training communities around the country based off of our models to be able to spread it across the country so that other places can really implement our models of success.
It's the youth doing it instead of the older people who don't know how this generation nowadays works out.
We just come up with ideas and really build each other up.
Before the YAB was founded, there was no concerted effort to end youth homelessness within our community. The YAB is made up of queer youth, of BIPOC youth, of parenting youth. We're really positioning people with real lived experiences as the ones to implement the solutions to really end homelessness across all of these populations.
The Gulf Coast Partnership values youth leadership and values youth voices. And with additional funding, we can expand that and reach more people and spread this model that we've proven works.
We have big dreams, and if we're able to get increased funding and increased support, we want to be able to teach communities around the country and around the world how to do what we're doing. It goes beyond solving and ending homelessness. It's something that we can all learn to create better structures, better movements, and a better world.
Yeah, very, very powerful. That is one of our Florida YHDP recipients, and they were awarded about $1.3 million a few years ago. As I said, we've awarded these YHDP to about 110 communities, and the value of the grants range from $1 million all the way up to $15 million. So really proud of the program that's got about $440 million out there already. We also, at our Office of Public and Indian Housing, also provide what they're calling foster youth to independence vouchers. These are vouchers that are dedicated and issued by the housing authorities in cooperation with child welfare agencies to youth who are exiting the foster care system, those between 18 and 24. So obviously making these rental vouchers available to them after, while they're exiting is really incredibly important to keep them out of the homelessness system. But these vouchers are also available to those who exited previously, but yet are still at risk of or experiencing homelessness. So our public housing authorities work with our continuums of care to make sure these resources are targeted. And one last area of focus to address youth homelessness system I mentioned is a brand new initiative we just launched, just made award of about $50 million to 38 communities under a program called Youth Homelessness System Improvement Grants. So those grants do not fund housing, do not fund services like YHDP does. It provides funding for all of the various systems in a region to come together, those systems that address youth in some way, youth in crisis, whether it's the education system, the juvenile system, the child welfare system, to get all of these systems who often operate in a very siloed manner. Everybody's got their individual data, everybody's got their policies, everybody's got their cohort of youth that they work with. These grants are to really pull all of those systems together and for them to work for opportunities to align their programs, to align their data, and to really develop a better system of dealing with youth who are in crisis. So really proud of that. We don't have, again, we just made those awards a couple of months ago, so really excited to see what comes out of that. And it also requires that youth be heavily involved in these system improvement grants. So excited about that opportunity.
Fantastic. The transition from foster care or from out-of-home care is a huge issue for us as well. So it's terrific to hear the programs you're doing in that space, and particularly that co-design approach, that really bringing in the expertise of lived experience into program design. That certainly resonates with the thinking around this conference and with wider housing system reforms in Australia. Is that something you're applying to other groups aside from youth?
Absolutely. We really, again, as I said, we started the heavy engagement of lived expertise in the youth side, but just incredible value coming out of that we have extended that into all of the different programs that we do. So, we at the federal government want to model the engagement that we expect to happen at the local level. So even in our work at the federal government to draft policy, to draft all of these notices of funding opportunity, to evaluate applications, to provide technical assistance, we engage people with lived expertise into that work with us at the federal level. So they are there reviewing our annual assessment reports, making edits, changes that they feel will make the report better and clearer to the communities that it is targeted to. They are out there working with our technical assistance providers, again, going into communities or providing guidance remotely. We also have grantees that, I should say, our continuums of care are required to have people with lived expertise and experience of homelessness on their boards, in their working work groups as well that support the board. Every notice of funding application that we put out, there is a requirement to have engagement of people with lived expertise. And we don't mean that in a superficial way. The applications actually require support letters from the people with lived expertise that had a part in submitting that application. So nothing about them without them. So that is our motto.
Fantastic. One of the things you talked about in your presentation was around the definitions of homelessness,
Yeah.
and this is an area where we, I guess, have some differences between our two countries. Australia has a pretty broad definition of homelessness in some respects, and the brief, non-recurring framing is one that's quite familiar to us. But ours also brings in a range of unsuitable living arrangements. So where housing doesn't have decent tenure. Or the tenure is short and non-extendable, a dwelling that's inadequate or one that's overcrowded, or where people don't have control of or access to space for social relations. So people who have some form of shelter but not adequate shelter is part of our thinking around it. And we certainly talk around primary homelessness, secondary homelessness, tertiary homelessness, which is very similar to the sort of framing you were using. But I want to draw particularly on the unsheltered homeless component, I guess in Australian terminology, the rough sleeping population, and the sorts of programs you're doing in that space.
Yeah, that even before the pandemic, in the area of unsheltered homelessness, that's where we were really seeing the numbers growing. It was very, very disturbing. And unsheltered homelessness, again, is encampments, whether visible to the public or not. We have encampments in rural communities, in the woods, tent cities inside the woods, but also in urban settings. A lot of unsheltered homelessness was really growing. So last spring, we issued a notice of funding opportunity, putting about $470 million out there for communities to apply for funding to address unsheltered homelessness and rural homelessness, which is another area where we were seeing the numbers on the uptick. With the funding under this program, we also partnered with our Office of Public and Indian Housing, who manages all the housing authorities, and we put together 3,300 vouchers, another $43 million towards this effort to get specific targeting for unsheltered and rural homelessness. These awards were made to about 65 communities, which covered 35 states, so it's a pretty broad effort. And we required, as part of the application, a real comprehensive plan, right? Normally, we just, we put the money out there, here's the criteria, you fill it out. But we really wanted a level of consciousness from our communities, so they were required to come together with other partners from the health system, the justice system, people with lived expertise also coming together, and really submitted a coordinated plan to us on how they would address unsheltered and rural homelessness. And based on that plan and all the other criteria, we were able to make these awards. Very, very needed. It gave the communities not always having to struggle between I do this or I do that. This is really separate funding that really allows them to engage in street outreach, navigation services, peer services, unique type of housing also available to them, but just really targeting this population. It is a real concern of ours, and also even coming out of the pandemic, I talked about the non-congregate sheltering funding that we had out there. A lot of folks who are living unsheltered, once the pandemic happened and we made resources, that was going into a non-congregate shelter setting was very, very appealing and successful. But once that funding went away, they went back into unsheltered situations. So this money coming on the tail end of the pandemic was really, really critical. So communities are working on it right now, and hopefully we'll see the impacts and the numbers.
Yeah. We're about to run out of time, but there was one point I wanted to pick up there. You know, some of the effects coming out of the pandemic, and as we sort of re-emerge. One of the things we've seen in Australia is a shifting of where people are choosing to live, and great pressure on our housing systems in our regions outside of the major capitals. To what extent is that a pattern you're seeing in the US, and are there particular programs focused on regional and rural communities? Yeah,
definitely. That NOFO that I spoke of was our attempt to really address what we're seeing that's happening in rural communities. Very, very different needs in our rural communities than in urban and suburban communities, of course. You're having, sort of communities in rural areas that don't have the level of services. So they face transportation problems, they face staffing problems, the resources are just not out there. So we felt it was very important, again, to make sort of a set aside of funding for the rural communities. We've got a couple of best practices, I'm trying to find them here that I definitely want to speak to, that we've been seeing in rural areas. So clearly there is a disproportionate number of substandard housing in our urban areas. So within our funding, we allowed a specific amount of funding available to help repair properties, right? You don't see multifamily units available, of a lot of rental units in urban areas. So we have to deal with the housing that is available, and bringing it up to a standard is really, really important. Making funding available to help with transportation, car repair, bus passes, shuttle services, that type of thing. And then we also provided staffing capacity to address their needs. They struggle to compete to hire the staff, so especially when they're competing with urban areas. So we also provide funding to bump up that particular, staffing in those communities as well. So a very unique challenge for us, as I'm sure it is here, too, but we need to target the resources. That's right.
Look, there are a whole lot of other questions I wanted to ask you, a whole lot of other topics we could have covered, but the conversation can continue after this session. Sure. I am, however, being nudged that this session is over. And it's time for our first morning tea break. So will you all please join me in thanking Jemine Bryon
from the
US Department of Housing and Urban Development for what has, I think, been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and look forward to continuing it. Please join me out in the exhibition precinct for morning tea. We'll be back for concurrent sessions at 11 o'clock, so make sure you know where you want to go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.